Sponsored by NordVPN. Why are thin smartphones suddenly a thing? With devices like the iPhone Air, Galaxy S25 Edge, and the latest foldables, it seems we finally have an alternative to ever thicker and bulkier flagship models. But what is the point of these things? Isn't the iPhone Air, for example, just a more expensive, less capable version of the iPhone 17? Well, in a lot of ways, yes. That's it for now, thanks for watching, drop us a like or a sub if you had fun today, and I'll see you next time. Now look, there's obviously a lot more to this phenomenon of slim phones than just that surface level observation. I absolutely think there is a place for super slim smartphones out there, but I do think a lot of discussion around phones like the Air and the Edge kinda misses the point. So let's get into it. If you look at the trajectory of smartphones over the past decade or so, they've only been getting bigger, thicker, and chunkier. The screens are larger, the proportions are boxier, and the dimensions are less hand-friendly. Thickness has slowly crept up towards the current 8.5mm standard of just about every major flagship, and weight-wise they tip the scales at over 200 grams. Plus they're flatter now, being less ergonomic than the phones of 10 years ago. It wasn't always like this, but as phones have evolved to do more, the hardware involved needs to take up more space, and inevitably also balloons in mass. One major reason for this is 5G. Even leaving aside the whole rat's nest of antenna that you need for modern 5G connectivity, the extra power draw of these high-speed networks and modems means ever bigger batteries being packed into phones. Even with improvements in the efficiency of cells, larger capacity lithium ions just need to be physically bigger. It's the same too with cooling. Flagship processors in particular, like Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Elite series, output so much heat that manufacturers need to engineer ever cleverer ways to dissipate that heat. A plain old heat spreader won't cut it. Instead, vapor chambers now bring the essence of water cooling to mobile technology, while also adding to the weight and the thickness. Fast charging and wireless charging are also factors, once again because the additional heat, you need extra heat spreaders to disperse that as you charge at increasingly higher wattages. And extra space needs to be allowed inside for potential battery expansion to avoid any spiky pillow situations. Do phone buyers really need 5G and super fast performance and fast charging? You could argue no, but they're not necessarily the ones in the driving seat here. Instead, device makers, especially in the Android world, want to brag about quicker gaming performance and faster benchmark scores. And chip makers like Qualcomm and mobile network operators both have a vested interest in pushing next-gen network technology like 5G, regardless of whether the real-world performance gains are actually noticeable to the average person. Whether you're packing a big old flagship phone or a slimmer device like the new iPhone Air, you want to make sure your gadgets are protected against online threats, and that's where this video's sponsor comes in, NordVPN. NordVPN is the best VPN service for online security, and now you can get up to 77% off a 2-year plan plus 4 months for free. Nord is one of the fastest VPNs in the world, with speeds of up to 6,700 megabits per second. It adds an extra layer of protection to your daily internet use by encrypting your traffic, shielding your online activity from hackers and snoopers, especially useful if you travel or use public Wi-Fi a lot. And you can appear as if you're virtually anywhere in the world with servers in over 126 locations. NordVPN also comes with an integrated anti-malware tool and continuous dark web monitoring, so you should know about any leaked credentials before the bad guys do. A single plan covers 10 devices with all major platforms supported, so head to nordvpn.com/xda to get up to 77% off a 2-year plan plus 4 months for free. Thanks to Nord for sponsoring, now back to the video. So smartphones today can juggle multiple apps at once with windowed multitasking, play games with ray-traced graphics, connect to data at multi-gigabit speeds, last multiple days, and charge in as little as 20 minutes. Those are all things we didn't have 10 years ago, so perhaps it's not surprising that the physicality of smartphones has changed to accommodate all those fancy new features. But at the same time, what if your priorities were different? What if instead of trying to fit all this stuff, even some stuff that may be superfluous to an awful lot of people, into a device that is around 8 to 9mm thick, what if you figured out just how much of it you could cut while still providing a decent enough experience? That's exactly what every manufacturer making a foldable phone has had to contend with over the past 6 years or so. Foldables are unavoidably twice as thick, at least in their closed form, compared to a regular handset. So one of their key technical challenges is to trim down as many millimeters as possible so it doesn't look like you're walking around with a cinder block in your pocket when you're carrying one of these things. But the funny thing is, once you've done all the engineering work to create a slim foldable, turns out you're already most of the way towards a super thin, non-folding phone. Both foldable phones and this new category of slim phones tend to lack the extra cooling hardware of flagship slabs. So maybe they're quick enough in your day-to-day apps, but will throttle more quickly in intense gaming, making them less ideal for longer gameplay sessions. We saw that in our benchmarking of the S25 Edge, and it seems to also be true of the iPhone Air as well. Their battery capacities are unavoidably lower, just about enough to get through a full day with slower charging speeds to boot, especially wirelessly. Software features like Samsung's light performance profile and Apple's adaptive power mode are used to throttle back performance in ways that won't be noticed as much, but unavoidably you do have, on paper, a less powerful device as a result. And in order to save cash as well as space, slim phones and foldables often skip over the most advanced imaging hardware and lean more on software processing instead in their camera setups. The trade-offs are pretty clear and understandable. The benefit, of course, is a much slimmer, a much more lust-worthy piece of hardware than your typical Ultra or Pro Max. But at the same time, you can do less with it, and it doesn't last as long in terms of both throttling and just raw battery life. So similar hardware, just very different priorities. Thickness has turned into the key area of competition for foldables in particular, as brands have scrambled to build book-style folds in the same footprint as a flat phone. That culminated this year in the back-and-forth battle between Honor and Samsung over whose phone was truly the world's thinnest foldable, the Magic V5 or Galaxy Z Fold 7. Now, bragging rights are all well and good, but I'm here to tell you that it really doesn't matter which one of those two is the thinnest. And it doesn't matter for the same reason it doesn't matter how much slimmer the iPhone Air is than the S25 Edge. And I say that having used all four, the V5, the Fold 7, the S25 Edge, and more briefly, the iPhone Air. That's because you really shouldn't be comparing these devices to each other. What really matters about a foldable or a slim phone isn't how they line up against each other in terms of physical size and thickness. The iPhone Air is 5.6mm thin to the S25 Edge's 5.8. And let me tell you, you are 100% deluding yourself if you think you could distinguish that in your hand or your pocket. What's much more meaningful about that comparison is, say, the lack of an ultra-wide camera or physical SIM slot in the Air, or alternatively the lack of easy magnetic accessory support for the Edge. The depth difference really is kind of secondary. And the same goes for foldables, of course. I've used the Fold 7 and Magic V5 interchangeably of late, and the tedious hair-splitting over chassis thickness is like the least important thing about that particular comparison. It's a rounding error. It really does not matter when you're using these devices. Instead, I care much more about the fact that Honor has been able to fit a really great triple camera setup into its foldable phone, along with a bigger battery thanks to the use of the latest silicon carbon cell technology. Or alternatively, the fact that Samsung still has the best foldable software with three-way split screen and persistent taskbar. None of that genuinely meaningful stuff has anything to do with which one of them is the thinnest. What actually matters to me is being thin while still being able to offer all those features. It's about making the right compromises. And the same applies to handsets like the iPhone Air, which, for all its faults, is about as close to a perfect minimum viable product in this form factor as I can imagine. Even then, I don't particularly care that it beats Samsung on paper in the millimeter stakes. Because the physical comparison that actually matters is not one slim phone versus another or one foldable versus another, it's the comparison between them and the iPhone 17 Pro Max or Galaxy S25 Ultra that you might otherwise be buying. That's why you really do see a meaningful difference to both heft and weight that might actually make a phone like the Air or the Edge a lot more enjoyable for some people to use. Having spent some time with them, devices like this feel like a return to what used to be normal before the past decade of bloat. You might have seen this image doing the rounds on social media showing how the iPhone 6 series was barely any thicker than the new iPhone Air. And the iPhone isn't the only family that applies to. The Galaxy S6, for example, was 6.8mm thick, closer to Air territory than any current Samsung slab. And at 138 grams, it feels like a non-functional dummy when you actually pick it up today. After a decade of moving towards ever thicker, chunkier smartphones, the first wave of super slim phones feels like an overdue correction, an antidote to the current crop of samey, bulky handsets where buying premium inevitably means carrying a tank of a handset with you everywhere you go. It just so happens that because of the tech now at manufacturers' disposal in 2025, thanks to foldables, things like more efficient OLED stacks, titanium frames, and eSIM, that we're well placed to bring about this new era of slim handsets. I mentioned the iPhone 6 series before, but who remembers the old bendgate saga? That unintended bendability is something that is conspicuously absent from the new titanium-equipped iPhone Air. Phones like this, and the foldables that they draw a lot of their technology from, are important not just because they're the very thinnest, but because they represent a swing of the pendulum away from thick, chunky, heavy premium smartphones like the Ultra and the Pro Max. And in an age where high-end phones often feel pretty samey, this is something new and exciting, even if, like me, you'd hesitate to use one as your daily driver. But what do you think? Does it matter which foldable or slim phone is the very thinnest? Is this just going to turn into a race to the bottom where things like battery life are sacrificed for extra millimeters being shaved off the spec sheet? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Stick around and subscribe for more iPhone comparisons coming very soon. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.